Killer on a White Horse, A Story of the Evening Watchman by Ned DeHaan, the audiobook, made available on BlackBoxOnlineRadio. Please like and subscribe, and feel free to visit BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 to support this channel. This book is dedicated to anyone who has ever believed, dreamed, or expressed passion, as well as to anyone who felt unsupported, discouraged, or held back in an unfair way. I hope that you will feel welcome here. Part 1. The Early Evening Watchman. The sun was beating down on the lone car in the dusty parking lot. Barry Albert sat in the front seat with a Diet Cola in a purple soda fountain cup. No ice, of course. Ice just took up space, even on one of the hottest days of the year. Barry's deep brown eyes overlooked the tall white walls of the vacant warehouse where he spent his evenings. It had been this way for more than 2 years now. Barry stood 5 feet 9 inches tall, but he looked small sitting in the front seat of his red Mazda MX-5. It had been 2 years since he had first sat in that car. Now he sat 5 nights a week, from 4 to midnight. Barry had moved to Williamsport around 2 summers before, and found his way into a temp job. The company had constructed a new warehouse, and because of the money invested in the project, they wanted someone sitting out front, just to make sure that the property wasn't vandalized. The job was only supposed to last 3 weeks, but because of permits, cutbacks, and red tape, Barry's job kept going. He was a watchman. 5 days a week he would sit in the small Mazda and watch the sunsets. The summers were strikingly hot and the winters were stark and cold. Barry carried 3 thermos containers in the winter season, 1 for tea, 1 for hot chocolate, and 1 for coffee. He would drink them in that order. The coffee would keep him up at night, but he was in a routine. It was a habit. He didn't deviate from the pattern. But it was now the summer, another hot summer, and since he had moved to Williamsport, all the summers had been hot. He had left Washington, D.C., the city where he had spent most of his life, to find a less expensive place to live. Barry had holed up in a place called the Birch Bark Motel, where he had planned to unleash his dream of being a professional writer. Blogger, actually. Then after 2.5 weeks, Barry had the sharp realization that people didn't read blogs anymore, and he was running out of money. Not that he ever had a plan to make money from blogging about politics and religion. It was a dream rather than a plan. He had wanted to be someone who talked about things that he found fascinating for profit. It was a lousy dream for Barry Albert, and as he realized his savings would deplete if he kept writing on the internet for no one to read, he began to job hunt. He nailed the first interview that he found, the night watchman position at the warehouse. Not knowing how long the job would last, Barry still lived at the Birch Bark Motel. He paid a weekly rate, which meant they could tell him to get lost at any time. If they had him on a monthly rate, they were subject to a different set of laws. Barry had calculated that he had spent 52% of his earnings from the watchman job on rent. The rest went to food, and by food he meant caffeine-related beverages. While Barry sat in the car in the parking lot of the warehouse, where they never had any problems or interruptions, he did 3 things. Number 1, listen to downloaded shows. Number 2, read books. And number 3, make roughly 1-hour phone calls to his best and only friend, Warren Jones. Barry worked 4 to midnight, and Warren worked 9 to 5. Warren was more of a recluse than Barry. They had met at a university French class, and the professor had assumed that they were friends because they were both biracial. Although it was awkward at first, they began to realize a real friendship. After Warren would complete his 9 to 5 shift, which he did from home as a business service representative, he would call Barry at 5:30 on the dot. The phone began to ring, like clockwork, if you count the digital clock on the phone as a piece of clockwork. Barry liked his calls with Warren. It was the best way to break the monotone aspect of the job. "Yellow," Barry liked to say. "Yellow to you too," Warren replied. "So I hope you're staying cool." "Yeah, I'm in the shade," Barry answered. "The air conditioner in the Mazda is still out, but today isn't too hot. How did work go?" "Lousy, to be honest," Warren muttered. "But I'm looking forward to the pasta bake I got in the cabinet. I bought another one of those pasta bakes. Do you remember when I told you about the pasta bakes 2 years ago? It's not the kind that you get from the box, it's the kind from the jar. It has all the sauce and the cheese already in it. Like melted cheese stirred around? All you need is the pasta. You see, some people think that paying $6 for a pasta bake plus $1 for the pasta is not a good deal, but every time you use a pasta bake it always makes enough for 2 meals. Most people forget about meal costs when they're making a budget. It might cost $7 for dinner, but it will be lunch tomorrow. That brings the meal cost down to $3.50. It is much cheaper than what other people pay for dinner. So you boil the water, you add the pasta. I got ziti, but I guess you could try penne or something. I wouldn't use spaghetti or anything like that because you're gonna bake it in the oven. You pour the pasta bake sauce on before you bake it, then I guess you bake it, and it's easy, trust me. Warren would go on, but that's the way that Warren was. The reason Barry appreciated his friendship with Warren was simple. Warren had a philosophy. Anyone will listen to your problems. They either want to help you or hurt you, but they will listen to your problems. A true friend is one that will listen to your explorations of daily life. Someone who will listen to you talk about grocery shopping, cleaning the bathroom, doing laundry, walking in the park. A person who will listen and find value in the discussions of the simple side of life is the true friend. You been writing anything lately? Warren asked Barry. Nah, Barry shrugged as he answered. Not for a while. Why not? Warren asked. Still thinking about Elizabeth, Barry went on. Ha! Warren laughed again. I would, too, but that was a year ago. You were on to something, but you can't let her get you down. Plus, there was always fiction. Senator Elizabeth Tong, formerly Representative Elizabeth Tong of the 8th District of California, was still on his mind. The one claim to fame Barry had as a writer was a cease and desist letter from Senator Tong. As a former blogger, Barry was well aware that not everything he put on the internet was something that he could substantiate. A lot of it was rumors. But 2 years ago he began researching the senator. He wrote numerous posts speculating at how Senator Tong had risen to power. Her family had run a Chinese restaurant in the desert of California, in San Bernardino County. Through his research, he was able to learn that San Bernardino was also the largest county in America. But that was another rumor that he hadn't verified. Then, Elizabeth Tong earned a law degree and got elected to the House of Representatives at age 26. Then she became a senator at age 32. Barry had noticed that a lot of people had been criticizing her, but no one was asking where the money was coming from. Although Barry had just been a blogger and was a virtual nobody in the political or journalistic world, he began to investigate. His investigation was halted when he received a cease and desist letter from her staffers. This told Barry that he was on to something. He wasn't sure what, but he was on to something. But suddenly, something pulled Barry out of the memories of the past. Several blue sirens began to flash, and their sound filled the open area. "Can you hear that?" Barry said to Warren. Chapter 2. Nah, I can't hear anything on my end, Warren answered. What is it? 5 cop cars just drove by, Barry explained. Are they in your parking lot? Warren pressed him for more details. No, they just drove on the main road. Just a second, Barry responded. He grabbed his logbook. One of the few benefits of having a simple job was he used his energies to keep meticulous records. 5:35. 5 police cars headed north on Williams Pike. It's probably nothing, said Warren. Sure, Barry agreed, but he still wanted to take his notes and keep them in order. The one chance he had had in the past to share a major piece of journalism regarding the senator had been botched. Barry had believed his claims to be true, but that's all that it was. Just a belief. He couldn't even tell the exact source of the money that Senator Elizabeth Tong had been using to fund her campaigns, or whom she had worked for the entirety of her political career, but Barry knew that there was something there. The phone conversation with Warren went on for another 45 minutes, 46 and 4 seconds to be precise, as the phone recorded it. Barry Albert closed the phone, drove around the parking lot once to catch the breeze in the Mazda. He was out of Diet Cola, so he reached out and pulled up a Starbucks cold brew, the kind in the glass bottles. Barry didn't save a cent. He blew all of his money on overpriced caffeinated drinks. After the daily phone call with Warren, Barry liked to read. He wondered when he would see Warren again. Warren was still in D.C., and Barry knew that he wouldn't visit the city until his job in Maryland would end. It had been 2 years now, but he was still waiting for an answer. Warren was in a good place, though. Barry knew that. Even if Warren had free time, he wouldn't get into any trouble. He wouldn't even go out to the bar. He wouldn't even go to a coffee shop. Warren was the largest homebody that Barry had ever met, which was surprising because they were both 29 years old. Barry didn't want to think about his 30th birthday approaching. He pulled a book out of the bag and opened it, and set down his Starbucks cold brew. It wasn't so cold after sitting in the hot car, but Barry didn't care. He also drank warm soda, so he was used to it. The book was Candide by Voltaire. Barry hated Voltaire, but he had never actually read anything by Voltaire, so he thought he should give him a fair shake. Barry's hawk-like eyes shot up. One of the police cars was driving down Williams Pike. It looked like one of the cruisers from before, but Barry wasn't sure. It most likely was, though, given the direction it was coming from. The vehicle didn't have its siren on, but began to pull into the warehouse parking lot. Barry closed the book without reading a single word. The windows in the Mazda were down already, and the convertible top was open, as Barry always kept it that way, unless it was raining or parked at the Birch Bark Motel. The cruiser was parked about 20 feet from Barry's Mazda. Barry always noticed that some police vehicles had 2 blue sirens, and some had 1 red and 1 blue. This one had 2 blue. Barry always wondered why. The officer exited the cruiser. As plain as could be, he walked over to Barry with a dead man's walk-in style of walk. There was an air of tension as he moved toward Barry Albert and his Mazda. Barry couldn't read the situation too clearly, but it seemed that the officer meant business. Or maybe the guy was just trying to look tough. "Hey, how are you doing tonight?" the policeman said. "Just fine," Barry answered. "How about yourself, officer?" "What are you doing out here?" the officer asked. "I'm the night watchman," Barry answered. "It's not even 7 p.m., the officer responded. "Okay, evening watchman then," Barry accepted. "Do you work with Ross Barrister?" the officer asked him. "Yeah, I do," Barry answered again. "He's my supervisor." The officer's tone of voice changed into a mocking tone. "Yeah, we talked to Ross," the officer went on. "He didn't say anything about any night or evening watchman. He said he had a team of unarmed security guards." "So you're the security guard?" "I prefer the term night watchman." Barry tried not to lose his cool. "Well, Ross Barrister didn't say anything about a night watchman," the officer continued, "and 7 in the evening sure isn't night time in the summer." "How can I help you?" Barry said in a tense way. "You got license and registration?" "Well, officer, this car is parked, and I've been parked for some time now," Barry went on. "Plus, we're on private property, and this is my place of employment. As I understand, I don't have to give you my license and registration in that instance." "So you're a lawyer now?" he asked. "No, sir." Barry felt he was gaining an upper hand. "I'm just the watchman. Night watchman. Or evening watchman. Or unarmed security guard, as you put it." "Yeah," the officer said. "I'll be in touch with Ross." "Hey, so," Barry paused. "What was going on down that way? I mean, all I do is sit here and wait. We don't normally see that many squad cars going down Williams Pike at this time." "Squad cars?" The officer didn't like the terminology. "Yeah, I mean the police cars that went by not too long ago," Barry continued. "You just keep watching, watchman," the officer said as he turned. He eased back, then he headed toward his car. Barry observed him turn around in the parking lot, and he drove off, onto Williams Pike. "You just keep watching, watchman," Barry repeated out loud. That was so lame. Barry often talked to himself as he lived and worked alone. As the sun went down on the hot summer evening, there was a glow of purple in the sky. Barry liked watching sunsets. It was one of the few activities that the job provided him. Normally at this time he pondered the layers of the conversations that he had with Warren, but for now he was thinking about the brief exchange that he had with the officer. Barry had dealt with his fair share of police officers while living in D.C. He had also been pulled over from time to time. In his life, he was the recipient of 2 speeding tickets. Other than that, he didn't have a criminal history. Barry couldn't shake the odd feeling that the officer had come by for a reason. What had happened down the road? He waited for his shift to end, as he started some iced tea. The questions were swirling around in his mind. Chapter 3. The red Mazda Miata MX-5 pulled into the parking lot at the Birch Bark Motel. Barry had a favorite parking space. It wasn't the one closest to his room. It was the one in the corner. From that point, you could see the entire view of the parking lot and the other cars on the road. If you drove in reverse to park, that is. And you would also have a view of the sunsets. On days when Barry wasn't working, he often spent his evenings watching the sunsets turn into summer nights. It seemed that Barry only ended up in 3 places: sitting in the car at work, sitting in the car at a different parking lot, and buying caffeinated beverages. Barry pulled out the key with the brown ovular Motel keychain dangling. He popped it in the lock. Then he felt the stuffy wave of air hit him in the face as he entered room 8703. Next door to him was room 8603. There was only one floor to the Birch Bark Motel, and the roof was painted brown. The doors were brown, the exterior walls were white, and Barry had been there for 2 years. He knew that he was in the 7th room from the manager's office, but he had never figured out how or why the rooms were numbered the way they were. Barry glanced down at his beaten-up Kyocera Raze smartphone with a built-on case. He connected to the Wi-Fi, because the automatic connection didn't work all the time. Thank goodness it worked now. The only way to unwind after a long day at the warehouse was to sit down and watch some Motel cable television and scan the sites like Facebook and Twitter. Although Barry never posted, with the exception of updating his profile picture and timeline cover. As soon as Barry collapsed on the unusually small motel bed, he saw the news notification. "What the?" Barry said out loud. He skim-read the news article that had showed up in his feed. It was about Williams Pike. He wanted to call Warren, but he knew that Warren was sleeping. "Body found?" Barry kept saying things aloud. The article revealed that the bodies of 2 teenagers had been found along Williams Pike. The time frame matched as well. When Barry had seen the police cars go by, when the blue sirens were flashing, they had been responding to the incident. What on earth could have happened? There was a particular relentlessness that began to take shape in Barry Albert. Reminded him of the time that he had the curiosity of experiencing rumors and chasing them around with Senator Tong. Something was out of the normal. Barry was a watchman. He knew when something seemed abnormal. All he did was watch. Barry grabbed the Kyocera phone and pulled up his contacts. If he couldn't call Warren, he dialed the only other number he could think of to discuss the events. "Hello?" a soft female voice answered. "Hey, are you still awake?" "Why do people always ask that?" she went on. "First, they call, then they say hello. They hear the hello, then they ask if someone is still awake. What do you think, Barry?" "Sorry, Blaze." He wasn't really sorry. "I just hadn't heard from you in a while." "Yeah, I know," she said. Blaze was the only flame that Barry had encountered since he had moved to the area. He had met Blaze when she was working at Burger World. Blaze had come over from Haiti several years ago, but she had spent 10 years in Western Maryland. She was sharp with English, but she still had an ounce of a Haitian accent. Blaze and Barry had dated for a short time. It wasn't serious to her, but it felt serious to him. The fling had lasted for 6 months, and Barry didn't want to admit it, but it had been more than a year since he had kissed a woman. "So, what are you calling me about at this hour, Barry Albert?" Blaze asked. "Did you hear anything about something weird in this area?" He answered with a question of his own. "No," she shot back. "I didn't hear anything about something weird in this area. Why would you ask me something like that?" "Barry, one suggestion. You got to get more precise in your language. You got to structure your ideas before you say them. Look, I'm watching a movie and you made me pause at the worst possible time. People prefer, if you didn't dance around the subject and just get to the heart of the issue." "There have been some crimes in the area," he said. "I just wanted to know if you knew anything about it. I just hope you're safe." "What kind of crimes?" Blaze inquired. "A murder. No, a double murder." Barry repeated the info that he read on the news headline. "Oh dear," Blaze almost gasped. "Barry, you want to call a woman at this hour and say stay safe by telling me about murder?
Do you think that any woman wants to hear about murder after midnight and still think that your stay safe will have any impact? Barry, you are a piece of work. Don't call me about this nonsense in the future.
Blaze hung up. Barry wasn't sure how to feel. He didn't like the way she was talking to him, but he was surprised that an ex-girlfriend answered the phone at all. Blaze was right, though. He did dance around the subject. Unless he was talking to Warren, he was a mess. Why didn't he just get to the heart of the issue? There was something going on Williams Pike. A double murder. And more importantly, why had the officer come by in such an awkward way? Barry was not one to entertain police cover-ups. He often found it as a distraction, to deviate from his normal routine. Barry did not turn on the television again. Instead, he reached into his desk drawer next to the TV and pulled out some birch bark motel stationery. Barry wrote a single word. Possibilities.